Kenya Legacy, it's an exciting time to be alive, an exciting time to watch week 12 of football. Now, the football itself I thought was all right. There was definitely more points scored. Our quarterbacks and receivers especially saw some love. A few running backs that we maybe haven't seen in a bit, and a few that we definitely have. Not as many red teams, more green teams, but that does create more issues when a lot of high scoring. Just because you score high doesn't mean you win. Trust me, I know. So many matchups came down to the Monday Nighter. Again, sadly, trust me, I know. But even more important, we're getting down to the nitty gritty, only a couple weeks left, so every matchup matters, every point value matters. So I'm going to stop talking about this stuff and I'm still talking, but I'm just going to cut it to the next part. So enjoy. Week 12 is in the books, and for the NFL people out there, this is leading us into the playoff chases. However, for fantasy people, which I know we all are, we are already in our playoff push, and this is really the last couple weeks to make some key changes and some key movements. Some people have clinched now, and some people might be mathematically out of it. So we're going to spend a bit more time on that. Let's see if I can follow through this time and be a little bit shorter, but there's just so many NFL stories I want to talk to, and many of them do bleed into our fantasy. I think for the first one, we got to talk about the early games. They did change a few things. A few of us had to rearrange our rosters, make some picks before we wanted to in terms of injuries. It does influence that with the extra couple days off. And realistically, we did it for 3 blowouts that we expected to be blowouts. Now, the scoring was high, so for fantasy people, all the people that were supposed to score mostly did, so not a lot of disappointment there. The only really big surprise, Green Bay over Detroit, and we knew that right away. So there's some Detroit people, depending on who you had, that might be a bit disappointed. But at the end, their run really did catch up. It's really just kind of the Gibbs owners and definitely the Detroit kicker owners that might be feeling a little bit sore. Realistically, though, the days went off pretty smoothly in terms of Thursday and Friday. I would say, though, with a divided America, I can't imagine it's been a lot of fun to sit down at large tabled gatherings like this with your extended family. Hopefully conversations don't bleed into the political, and with the recent elections and abortion laws being such a swing, and obviously elections coming up and the war in the Middle East, there's a lot of things that could probably get people's uncles and aunts off topic in a very uncomfortable way. But from what I understand, at least NFL kind of helped you out there, as the most contentious overall conversation in the country on Thursday happened when 77-year-old Dolly Parton walked on the stage for the halftime show at the Dallas Cowboys game, really getting most base people on the table to start the controversial conversation that started with the words, I don't know, would you? If that can help bring America together, then Dolly Parton is once again being a saint. Not only did she do 20 minutes on the stage, no lip synced, with people 1/4 of her age not being able to do that. Do remember what she did over COVID times and a lot of the money she gave for vaccine research, and she has literacy programs. So she actually might be America's hero, also by saving Thursday. Moving on, though, that Sunday, that meant that there was less games, so more attention on the games. Now, one of the positives, scoring was a little bit back this week. Not crazy, and there wasn't a lot of crazy games, but heading into week 12, just a few quick stats for you. Lowest passing yards per game since effectively they started keeping that stat, so that's been about 60 years. That's not great. Highest sack rate since 1998, and as a lot of people know, when you get quarterback sacks, it does tend to end a lot of drives. There's a huge percentage when you are sacked that you don't convert. Field goals were at an all-time high, great for our kickers, but not good for the rest of our rosters, and some of our rosters don't even have kickers. And touchdowns were the lowest they had been since the mid-2000s. So coming into this week, the fact that even though some of the games weren't close, a lot of the big offenses came out and offensed, which was great for a lot of our teams. You'll know that because if you scroll through most of the league matchups, there were more greens than reds this week, which is typically, at least a good start. If you use 48 combined total points as kind of a metric for a decently scored game, there was at least 7 this week that hit or went beyond that, which we haven't been able to say in the last couple weeks. Take the Pittsburgh Steelers, for example. They obviously had an offensive coordinator that since they've had him, Matt Canada, I hate that Canada's his last name, so there's people out there that are going to blame the fact that he's not American. He's not Canadian. It's just his name, I think. Since he became part of the Steelers organization, they essentially haven't had a 400-yard total offense game. The second he leaves, they bounce back. How might that impact our fantasy rosters? Let's see if the 1 week, sometimes that coaching bubble happens. You get the 1 week of the FU to the coach, and then they go back to normal. Maybe not. Maybe Pittsburgh's offense will be a little bit more stable and something people can bank on. I don't know. Up to you. You can take that. But I'd say the biggest one, we had a couple tight games and a couple going down to the last field goal. One I'm going to mention later, but for a different reason. But the game of the week was likely Buffalo against Philly. Not only was it probably the most important game in terms of two highly touted teams that need to make either a lock on the first overall seed in the NFC, or for the Bills trying to get back into the playoff contention. As of right now, if the league stopped, I don't believe they would actually make the playoffs. And it really came down to some big plays. I mean, a lot of offense. The defense was a little bit more scarce, but for our fantasy rosters, this was great. A lot of us have a ton of those players on our teams, so we were probably pretty happy for the most case. Even people with Gabe Dave actually got points this week, although he may have been on your bench. I think the Philadelphia game has matched what most Philadelphia games have been. They look overmatched. They don't look necessarily like they're in control. Then suddenly, for just like the last little bit, they make a couple pushes, a couple runs, and then they somehow win, and you feel good in the end. If you haven't seen the end of the game, it's worth a watch. Probably the most impressive regular season field goal that I can remember. 59 yards in the rain, not favorable conditions, to tie it. Playoff kicks are their own little kind of chestnut. But in terms of regular season, I got to think that's one of the most important. Let's see how that kind of rolls moving on. It does kind of lead us to the parts of the season that you want to pay attention to, because they will have an impact, I would think, on our fantasy play. There's some teams that are trying to lock down that one seed. Say, for instance, in the AFC, it is hectic, not just to make the playoffs, but if you froze, if you took whatever the scores were at varying points over this past week of football, 4 different times there would have been a different number 1 seed in the AFC. So not only is the fight for that 6th and 7th playoff spot going to be fierce, to get that bye is going to be important to a lot of teams. So how they choose to kind of approach those matchups might be important. Versus the other way around, our other field goal kick to end all field goal kicks, the Patriots went down for a tying field goal, and it was essentially a toe poke, and mysteriously they missed, meaning that they are a lock right now for at least one of the top 3 picks in the draft next year. So I got to think, Patriots fans probably are overall okay that they lost to the Giants, because it actually increased their odds. I'm wondering, Bear fans, how you feel. It was a pretty anemic Monday nighter with Minnesota and Chicago. Chicago's not really looking like they're going to be a playoff hopeful. They really would have to go on a run and get a lot of help. I know they're kind of showing off Fields to see, is he going to be the guy? If you're not aware, they also have the Carolina Panthers, which is currently the number 1 overall pick. Had they lost that game, they would be getting the number 1 and the number 4 for next year. They did win the game, so that's no longer a thing. So I got to wonder, Chicago fans out there, if you're really happy about that last-minute win, or if maybe you would have been okay with a loss there. Speaking of next week, we're going to get right into it. It is an important one for all fantasy leagues. We are approaching the playoffs. A lot of last-minute things. A few people are starting to lock in their playoff spots. A few people are getting eliminated. We'll go over that when I go over each of the leagues. But I got to mention the bye weeks. This is going to be big. 6 teams. Once again, NFL is doing it to us one more time. I believe next week there's still buys, and then after that, I don't think there are anymore. But for this week, the Giants probably doesn't affect too many other people other than maybe some wide receivers, but definitely Barkley. Minnesota, we do have some of their receivers, right? They're top tight end in the league. That's going to have an impact. Chicago, again, people are in love with Fields. You got Moore, right? The revolving running backs. Vegas, Jacobs has been an asset. Devontae Adams. But I think the big 2, Baltimore Ravens, Buffalo Bills, both of them are out. Both have most of their offense covered by us, and their defenses, and their kickers. So we're going to want to get to it. How are you going to react, and what should you do? First, maybe we do the matchups. Then let's think about next week. Gene, the freaking machine, just cannot be stopped right now. Not only is he once again victorious, but he's once again our top scorer. And like 200 doesn't even mean a thing to him anymore. He's like a decent flex player over 200. How did he do it? And here's the crazy part. Now we see double digits from everybody, so that's how he did it. But Herbert didn't play that great. He was, aside from your defense, Gene, your lowest scorer. Unreal. Your running backs were fantastic, but Williams coming out of the gate and out of injury to be our running back 1 was obviously something you like. Taylor was not in the top 5, but he was just outside. CJ Stroud, who is your second quarterback here, while Herbert underperformed, CJ certainly didn't. He was our quarterback 4. Hawkinson was our tight end 4 as well. All right, so 4 seems to be your number. And everybody else just got you points, right? Waddle, you would think, but this was actually quite a high receiver total here, or a high receiver week. We can see on the other side of things, Nico Collins actually did crack the top 5. He was our wide receiver 4, and you weren't far off, so we can see where that rolls. On your bench, this is crazy. You had Jacobs, who was our running back 4 on your bench. So this could have been worse, people. Although I don't know who you really would have put him in for, and he might have hurt your cut. Like he only would have gotten a few extra points. Woody, it's ironic with the name because you're coming up flaccid right now, buddy. Now's the time where you want to be on fire, and you had a good week. 138 is often enough to put you in the hunt, but you didn't quite get to your predicted. Now, that's not without Hurts' performance. Obviously, that was fantastic, and his rushing touchdowns are really helping you. I already mentioned Nico was in the top 5. You had a running back here in your flex who did all right, but that was about it. Detroit's defense on Turkey Day probably just honked you there. That did not make you feel good. Barkley was kind of the Giants' only spot here to maybe get points against New England, but that was just a dumpster fire of a game. And Brown just, after so many weeks of consistency, that combination had always been pretty hot. Unfortunately, Hurts was thrown to somebody else that day who we'll get to in a little bit. On your bench, though, you had some promise. Rice had a massive game, and actually he was our wide receiver too, so that kind of stinks for you. And Zay Flowers, not far off of that, could have helped you out. But again, ifs, buts, candy, and nuts, at least you got the people here to play it. You weren't going to take Gene down. You just would have taken somebody else down. If Gene's going to put up 215, let's just give him the title and call it a day, because that's just something that a few of us can do sometimes, but no one's done at this consistency. So right now, you just got to hope you don't play him, or he maybe takes pity on us, or maybe the tides turn. Who knows? Either way, keep on keeping on, Gene, and just take the league down if you want. Only a couple weeks left to dominate us before the regular season's over. What are you going to have to bounce back, pal? I think you're not out of it, right? You still 6th spot. You're still in striking distance. Ironically, you are one of the people who voted to keep it the top 4. Next year, we'll go to 6 and you'll be hanging on to a playoff spot, but that's not next year, buddy. It's this year. You're not out of it, though. You're just going to have to start winning some matches. Not gonna lie to you, this one hurts a little bit. Now I'm happy for you, Kent. Getting the 5th spot is good, and I'm glad that you still have the playoff hunt. But I was the 3rd highest scorer this week. Mother. And I'm looking at my schedule, folks. If you're looking for someone to tumble from the top, we'll get to that later, but I have some tough games coming up. Anywho, let me just walk you through. Let me tell you, let Unky Fish tell you a little story here. I did wake up, actually, and lately on the night games that have interest, I'll wake up and then I'll do that thing where you go back and watch them while the game's still on and you catch up with the commercials, so by the end you can watch it. And I will say by the time I caught up, it was midway near the end of the 4th quarter, and I had this one. I was even predicted to win it because his boy Fields down here kept dropping the ball for no particular reason. But when he wasn't dropping the ball, he was dropping it more artfully into the hands of only DJ Moore, and he seemed to be his only target. That last drive just killed me. If Minnesota just could have run the clock out, I had the game. But sure enough, he has to complete about a 30-yard pass to put Moore over the 100 barrier, bumping him ahead of me, and that was it. That was all the points he needed. It was pretty tight before then. But if you look at Rushke and how he's able to do it, Allen was our quarterback 1, so well done there. Dallas was actually tied for our number 2 defense. Actually, a 3-way tie with Denver and Green Bay. Someone had Denver, no one had Green Bay, just as an FYI. Everyone else just kind of did what they needed to do versus me, who really didn't have anyone in the top 5. Now, that's not 100% true. I did have my quarterback down here who was the quarterback 5, but everyone else just did, okay. Olave obviously overperformed. Brown just under. Jackson was probably the one that kicked me the most. I really thought everyone else is throwing against the Chargers. Why not him? And I thought even maybe the passing game in Indy here. Downs, it's really hard for me not to call him the syndrome, but I know that's inappropriate. Cleveland's defense as well. I mean, come on, kiddos. Garrett gets hurt. Denver can score points now. What the crap is happening? Now, I did leave a few on the bench, but so did he. I'm not going to go ahead and blame that. If he puts Myers in, this game's probably over a little bit earlier. But I will say I'll be magnanimous in defeat, even though I know you're only supposed to be in victory. Congratulations, Rushke. You keep the dream alive. You're still right on the doorstep. You're really going to come down to your last couple matchups. As for me, as we will find out, I really need a win, and I really need it soon because my schedule is not getting any easier. Sticking with people in our top 4 who had to come through this week. Well done, Maxon. I know you've had some shaky weeks over the last couple, but you promised to come back, and you did. So congratulations. 19-point win off your former middle school colleague in Tim here. Now let's just take a quick look on how it happened. You were one of the few people who were actually pretty happy that Addison was in and Jefferson was out because that was obviously who you were playing here. Tim caught it, which was good, and took him out of the lineup. Unfortunately for Tim, Kupp is just good enough to play every week, but bad enough to stink and just guard you with it. Now for you, Laporta was in our tight end top 5. He was our tight end 3, so that was a good start there. And Miami had our number 1 defense overall, so you got to be feeling pretty good about that. Henry doing okay, but everybody else just kind of underperforming. Now slinging Sammy Howell against Dallas, he put up 300 yards. That's pretty good. Would have been nice if you could have maybe put one more in the end zone for you, though. And on your bench, like we saw, you're still dealing with massive injury issues. Now, Baltimore would have probably been a good play, but not for you because Miami was even better. But for the rest, Baltimore was actually our defense 5. So between your IR injuries and just you're not playing and the bye weeks that are coming up, Tim, you're still going to have to battle here. Maxon, congrats, pal. Top 4, you got to keep it. So obviously you're in the driver's seat. You keep winning. You'll keep doing fine. I don't know if you were pumped or not after Turkey Day, but you obviously had Goff, who slightly overperformed. McCaffrey, though, the CMC Music Factory was our running back 2. And hey, who had the foresight and the guts to play Gabe Dave after the last couple of weeks? Well, you did, my friend, and he paid off for you with 24 solid wide receiver points and just on the outskirts of being in that top 5. Now, you got a little cute with your defense, and you could have gotten a few extra points there. But aside from that, I don't really blame Hubbard and Najee. I mean, Najee could be gutsy, but without the offensive coordinator in, no Canada, who knows what that's going to mean. You took some gambles this week. You trusted your gut, and it paid off. You're 7-5, and you got a playoff spot. Funny, 143 is just fine, but when I see Connor and Sheamus, I just expect them to be over the 150 mark, and so did Yahoo. But it was enough to take down Dilber this week. How did you do it? I don't have anyone to talk about in the top 5. None of your people were in the top 5, but obviously your wide receivers were fine. Mahomes just always seems to be around this mark, and Murray did fine for you. McBride, fine, right? So you just got points all across the board. You didn't really have too many stinkers except for obviously Buffalo, but that was gutsy. Buffalo against Philly. I guess you really must have believed. Now look at your bench, however. You left a lot to be desired. Patty Freiermuth was our tight end 1. Ridley was just a good receiver. But Bijan was our running back 3. So you did leave some stuff on the bench, but that's what happens when you have a deep team. Sometimes that happens, and you didn't need it this week. You won by 30. Jeff, what can I say, pal? Smith obviously was a good play. He was our wide receiver 3, so it's good to see that he's starting to get used more, but Purdy was not pretty. Cooper, I mean, who's going to throw him the ball? You just had kind of bad luck all the way up and down the board. Again, you might have been happy on Turkey Day because Montgomery came out and had a day, but then Kittle, who's gone off and actually won you weeks, just no bueno. Stafford looks pretty good, though, and the Rams offense could be tough. Or maybe it's the Arizona defense. Not sure. Either way, we always know that you're someone who's not going to throw in the towel, although next week I kind of wish you would, but we'll get to that later. In the win of the week, the former Lakeside crew, because one has moved away, Rennie takes Marco down. You know Rennie's not going to rest on his laurels and not care. He's going to play spoiler and try and take everyone down with him. Rennie, how'd you do it? Well, you had a good Turkey Day. In terms of Dax, he was our quarterback 3, so well done there. And Pacheco was in the top 5. He was our 5th highest scoring running back. Now, Kelsey also popped his way. He was the 5th tight end. You did have your down spots here. Very difficult for me to say Hunt without being inappropriate, especially the way it's spelt right here. So I'm just going to drift by, but he didn't get you a whole lot of points. And unfortunately, man, your bad quarterback luck just keeps on going. DTR got hurt, and it looks like, I think it was concussion-based maybe. You can click on that magic box and find out, but he may or may not be an issue for next week. If we take a look, you didn't have as much on your bench. Flip over to this side. When it's 3 points, it's hard not to kick yourself here, Marco, just because, I mean, obviously you can celebrate the successes. Okay, like Love was actually our quarterback 6, so just out of the top 5. Evans was our 5th scoring wide receiver. Pollard scores a touchdown. You would have thought of all people, Wilson be the one to not get you points. No, he did. But Thielen massively let you down. Houston against Jacksonville, you kind of set yourself up there. Had you started the beautiful golden mustache instead of Thielen? All right. Had you put Atlanta in instead of Houston? But again, ifs, buts, candy nuts. Great matchup. Great win. Tightest margin of victory. So well done, gents. Gave us something to watch. We've covered this part, but I'm going to scroll down just so you can take a look at what I was talking about here. It's getting nice and tight in the middle here. So right now, here is the border point, but Mr. Rushke here is actually our second highest scoring team, so he'd be a tough one. You do not want to be in a tie with him because he will take it down, and I don't think we have enough games left for us to really bounce against that. Maybe Connor would, but I think if Connor slipped all the way down, he'd be pretty upset. We see Gene is through, as he should be. He's on a rocket that essentially he's going to have to really drop the ball in the next 3 weeks. A top spot is likely, if not almost guaranteed, but technically he doesn't have the top one locked up. There is a way that Connor can catch him. I don't think I can. I guess I could. If I won out and he lost out, technically I guess I could take that spot too. But I'll just be happy with a win, as we're going to see in a minute here. We still have people alive and well. Now, I have not done the math to see if Tim can technically get in and get out. I would assume if he wins the next 3 and we have a lot of losses here, technically he's not out yet. I think everyone below is definitely out. This really puts us in our top 6 to see who can kind of make this climb. Can Maxon hang on? Can Rushke make a push? Can Woody snap out of it and get back to it? Can I win a game for the rest of it? And I mean, Connor and Seamus just look to be pretty consistent. I think they got to be breathing easy, but you never know. And why was I so complainy? I almost used a different word, but my schedule, check it out. I got Jeff, then I got the top 2 in the league. So if you were wondering, is there a possibility of our top 4 folding? Absolutely it is, because apparently I'm playing them all. So I might be falling like a rocket. Let's check it out, though. I already mentioned I played Jeff. So Jeff, you want to take a week off? That's cool. Just rest, relax, think about your health. Marco, we're really going to need you to bounce back here, buddy, after that game. But as you can see here, what is going to be a huge part of this week as I click on Rushke's team. Bye. All right, no quarterbacks left in the tank, so you're going to have to look at your bench and see what you got going on here. I expect some active waiver wires. I don't know if you noticed, but he's gone for the year, pal, so you might need to do something about that. So Marco, you might be catching Rushke on a vulnerable one, but I wouldn't count him out. You really never know what he's going to do next. Aside from that, we've got some other pretty good ones, I'd say, headed by our bottom tier here. So obviously, I mean, bottom tier is in the last 2 here, not obviously. I'm talking about 1 versus 2. That is not the bottom tier of our league. It is the top tier. Can Connor and Seamus knock off this winning streak that Gene is on, or is Gene just going to keep ascending like a rocket? Connor and Seamus, I believe if you win, you might clinch a spot. If you lose, still technically you won't, because we do have the 3 games. And this one's got to be not just bragging rights. I would expect a side bet anyway with these 2, but the fact that a playoff spot could be on the line for this one, especially thinking what Kent's got to do here, this could be a massive matchup. So we got Woody versus Maxon. Excited to see what happens. Either way, this is why we play the game, folks. We got a couple weeks left, so not only is the NFL getting super interesting, our league's getting even more interesting. That's week 12 in the books. I'm already pumped up for week 13.